All right. Hey, y'all. My name is Shaïna. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a Black, queer, non binary person with a very low shaved head. I'm wearing some pretty funky geometric glasses that are this really cool kind of golden color. And I am also wearing some abstract brown and white earrings with little gold. Um, they're actually like little gold pots at the end. And I'm wearing a kind of like flowy shirt that has some really cool earth tone, like grapes all over it. And I am sitting in my office in front of some abstract artwork behind me that has all been done by myself. And I am currently on Sisipahawa land in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I will pass it to Zoe.
Hi, folks. I'm Zoe. My pronouns are they, them. I am a white Ashkenazi anti-Zionist Jew. And I am currently in Ten Sleep, Wyoming in a climbing gym. I honestly don't want to butcher the indigenous names of the land that I'm on, so I will allow y'all to read that in the chat. And I am wearing kind of clear glasses with some neon chartreuse and a shirt that says "Crush the Patriarchy" with yellow and white stripes, and a little shirt, button-up shirt over that with pink and black polka dots.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zoe and Shaïna. And since we have some new folks, we'll reintroduce ourselves a bit more quickly. But so my name is Stas. I go by they, them pronouns. And I have blue ombre hair, blue lipstick, blue glasses, and a colorful fairy and mushroom puffer vest.
And just briefly, my name is Leander. You can also call me Lee, and I go by he or they pronouns. And we're here on Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne lands in Denver, Colorado.
And so what you can see on the screen here is we have a bit of the cover from our Resilience and Revitalization zine that was created by Zoe on the left. And we'll get into a little bit more of what that image really captures for us. And then on the right-hand side, we have our logo, and it says, "Summoning Queer Abolitionist Futures, Making Spring Up's Resilience and Revitalization Zine." So hopefully that's the session you intended to be at, because that's where you are right now.
And something we just realized is that this zine, which took us about 18 months to make, came out exactly 1 year ago. So we're going to be talking about the process of creating it and then just sort of the impact that we've seen it have over the last year.
All right, let's go on to the next slide, Shaïna. So we wanted to ground in this quote that is at the beginning of the zine. And when we were in the process of creating this zine, we were actually watching the last Allied Media Conference digital events, which was about 2 years ago now. And there was this live plenary featuring Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and in it, she shared this quote, and it really caused us to realize that the work that we were already doing, the zine that we were creating, felt like it spoke to what she was kind of calling on in this quote. And so I'll read the beginning of the quote and the rest is on the next slide. So, "I love to look at the things that didn't happen. For instance, Toni Cade Bambara at the 1988 Essence Black Women's Writers Retreat, she said, 'We should create an anthology, and it should be everything. It should have poems, stories, recipes, and star maps, and legislative proceedings.' That particular project did not happen with Toni Cade Bambara's lifetime, but I love going to that moment because I understand that not everything we call into being is to be owned by us as individuals in this lifetime, or even as collective participants in specific moments." Let's go on to the next slide. "Every time, that's another portal that opens, and we can go live in those portals anytime. If we just know that it was there, if we just sense it and believe in it, this is what visionary fiction has taught me. If we can even imagine it ourselves, we can travel there and come back through to this moment through that energy. Alexis Pauline Gumbs. And so that was in the plenary with Alexis DeVoe, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, and Walida Imarisha at the 2020 Allied Media Conference. And what you'll find is that the zine that we made, that we were already in the process of curating, features star maps, recipes, stories, poetry, and so many of the things that Tony Cade Bambara was calling on in 1988, and then that Alexis Pauline Gumbs was calling on again in 2020.
And even someone wrote out a model for a legislative proceeding that could be used to address campus sexual assault. So we really felt like that. We were just like, wait, whoa, because we had already been kind of compiling our submissions, and we were like, is that what we're creating? Like, is that what like was being called into being there?
And we also wanted to acknowledge that most of our zines have been really just us making things from scratch with whatever amount of time and funds we had at the time. But we applied to get funds from Life Comes From It, which is a grant making circle facilitated by practitioners of restorative justice, transformative justice, and Indigenous peacemaking. And we were selected to have a grant to be able to fund this project. And so that's part of why we were able to pay the team to work on it, as well as pay all of the contributors, as well as pay everyone who applied to be a part of it. Even if they weren't selected, we gave them a gift card, either just for cash or for a few aligned kind of online marketplaces, including Shaïna's store, and also like a Black-owned marketplace for herbal products. So we wanted to make sure that everyone who contributed to the project was resourced by this wonderful grant that we were able to get access to. So let's go on to the next slide.
And did anyone have the fortune of being able to see that plenary at the last AMC? It was really great. Yeah.
And if you were to get access to our zine online for free, we have the entire plenary embedded in the platform so that you can watch it there. So yeah, so something that is kind of unique about the way that we decided to approach this was that we really wanted to have a clear vision of what abolition could look like. And we had been part of a few different campaigns, particularly in South Florida, to try to make abolition feel more tangible. And many of those started with this idea of a whimsical future, but then became very kind of concrete platforms for political advocacy and veered away from the kind of vision that we were aiming for at the time. And so we decided to make our own vision. But part of what we wanted was to bring this idea that all of us had separate visions, but that they could all live in the same world. And that so much of those visions were actually already present in our lives today. Little pockets of abolitionist freedom that we all experience day to day within our lives. And how could we kind of expand those into a more holistic vision that other people could be invited into?
And I think that especially at that time, we were hearing, I think transformative justice was increasing in popularity. And we were hearing from a lot of young people that it just felt like almost this type of expertise or this thing that felt unattainable to them or that they didn't know how to do. And so not all of them, but through this project, we really wanted to uplift the voices of young people and exploring what abolition looked like and felt like in their everyday lives to really center those voices in imagining what the future will look like.
And so we wanted to ground with our own kind of myth about the past and the future that we had already been working on for a few years. And we created this character, Shaïna, who lives in the future and is sending us a message from the future about how to get to the abolitionist future that they live in. And that this kind of zine would be a collection or an anthology of different visions from today, but that if you follow them, you end up in the world that Shaïna lives in the future. So we wanted to ground the session in the opening message from Shaïna that's in the beginning of the zine itself.
Yeah, so I can read this, and this is something that I wrote. Hi, I'm Shaïna. My people left your planet at the beginning of the year 2022 during the disharmonization. Actually, we sort of caused it, but that's another story. We were humans once too. But to avoid the collapse of what you call the earth, we had to become something different, something more, and in some ways, less. My ancestor was part of a collective that opened a wormhole to the future I live in by tapping into a unique frequency accessed through creativity and visioning of a liberatory future. At that time, there was a pandemic. Most people had a lot of debt and no guaranteed housing, healthcare, education, or even food. So they needed to spend 40 hours a week for 40 years of their lives working, mostly for big corporations and institutions that caused more problems than they solved. 4 ancient guardians who guide human evolution heard their vision and formed an alliance with the most powerful being on earth, the mycelial mother. They performed a ritual to open a wormhole to the place where my people thrive. The stories, recipes, spells, and visions collected here in this zine will help you tap into that frequency so that maybe you can come with them. Maybe it's you, my ancestor, reading this. If so, thank you. I love my life here in the world you helped to create, a world where we can realize our potential individually and collectively, and live in care and abundance in ways that must seem nearly impossible to you. It is in our nature to be free together.
All right. So the team that kind of stewarded this project is on the screen here. So you can see myself, Stas, Lee, and then Shaïna, who's been chatting with you. And then we also have Sochi and Alexis, who were not able to make it today, but who were editors on the project. Sochi in the bottom left, it was our youth fellow at the time, and they were our transformative justice and healing fellow. And Alexis, who we had been working with for a few years, was one of the editors who really did a lot of coaching for the contributors to build all of their kind of individual ideas into a collective vision that would flow together.
And so on the next slide, we have a little bit by Sochi, our youth fellow, talking about the collaboration here. So Sochi says, as a young person, there are times when the enormity of transformative justice is overwhelming. There are so many incredible practitioners, many of whom are elders or elders to be, who move with unshakable wisdom and grace. In this work, I usually feel like a baby deer learning to walk, awkward and unsteady. The year in which I have been lucky enough to be exposed to TJ is a complete 180 of the way I grew up, and the whiplash is as painful as it is exciting. The R&R zine, however, is exactly the resource I would have wanted when I first got involved in this work. It is made by young people who are also unsure and figuring it out as they go. It is a collection of poetry, art, and spells, all manifesting something better than the world we were born into. The process of hearing from so many young people about their vision and working with our other incredible team members, Lee Roth, Stas Schmidt, Alexis Hyatt, and Shaïna Dolini, was unbelievably inspiring. More than anything else, it solidified for me that there are so many people living and breathing this work. Many of these folks might not consider themselves TJ practitioners, but have incorporated that worldview into their daily life. I'm often reminded of something I once heard Mariam Kaba say, that the current prison industrial complex was made by thousands of people, each making thousands of small decisions. And abolition will have to be the same way. Hopefully this resource will help affirm for folks that no matter what they do and spend their time on, there is a way to do it that aligns with the values of transformative justice. We will create something new and healing, thousands of small decisions at a time. And I'd love to hear in the chat just what of that stands out to you. You can take a moment to look at it again. Are there any specific words or phrases in that that you really resonate with? The whiplash is as painful as it is exciting. Yeah, just how intense it is to be exposed to new ideas. And I think also for me, it's, we're also probably still considered in the category of youth, I guess, but to have someone who was a decade younger than us talking about how all of this still felt so new to them, I think was really interesting. RJ says, might not consider themselves TJ practitioners, but have incorporated that worldview into their daily life, right? So, really, like being expansive and inclusive with who we see can be part of building our abolitionist future.
And then I see Zay said, thousands of people making thousands of small decisions. Absolutely. That small is all, and the fractals that Adrienne Marie Brown talks about, right? And I think a lot of what this came out of was we were doing a lot of transformative justice and consent education work with young people, high schoolers, college students. And so many of them over and over and over again, I heard saying the same thing that I felt when I was in college, which is, I don't know that I can claim that language. That feels like something that other people outside of me do. That feels like something that people who write books do. That feels like something that people who are, my aunts and uncles and parents' age have the ability to claim. But for me, I'm just out here trying to survive, trying to be with the people in my life. And I don't know that that's something that I can claim. And yet, when we were speaking to our mentors, a lot of what they were telling us was that they were exhausted, they were burnt out, they wanted other people to be able to be doing this work as well. And we were kind of problem solving of what does it mean for y'all to be saying that you want other people to claim this and to be able to be doing this work, and that so many of the young people that we perceive as absolutely living from these values and from these approaches don't feel like that's something that they can claim. And so the idea behind the zine was, how can we share the voices of young people talking about things that we believe are under the arc of transformative justice, or at least what we want, if we believe that abolition is not just about getting rid of what we don't want, but is also about advocating for what we do want. How can we share those visions in a way that feels tangible, that feels accessible, and that feels achievable to the young people in our lives?
Yeah, and so we wanted art to just be like at the core of this. And so we wanted to bring in one of our good friends and one of our favorite artists, Zoe. So if you go to the next slide, you can see us and Zoe finally with the print copy of the zine.
So this is a Polaroid from when Zoe came to visit us, and we finally gave them print copies of the zine.
And so, yeah, can you go to the next slide, maybe with some of the art, and then we'll pass it to you, Zoe, if you want to talk about jumping in on this as an illustrator.
Hello again, everyone. For those who missed the intros, I'm Zoe. My pronouns are they, them. And I had the honor to do the illustrations for this incredible zine. These are some of the original pen and ink drawings that I started with. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, I assume, but there is a myth that we have incorporated here. Y'all heard a little bit about Shaïna and the mycelial network, mycelial mothers. So we were trying to incorporate a lot of that. And the cat that you see in the bottom left is one of the 4 guardians. And the cat is a really important figure. They are the water element. And they also work within the mycelial plane. So what you see on the left-hand side is actually one of the wormholes in the mycelial network. And then, of course, some mushrooms to accompany it. I'll leave it there and continue on as we go.
Yes, totally. And what Zoe's getting at is that a few years before this, we wrote a myth about the founding of our society and a vision of the future. But that myth is really something internal for Spring Up. And so we wanted to capture the energy and the vision of the myth with the guardians through the illustrations without putting the entire text in, so that the content would really be the visions of the contributors, but that the guiding world that you were stepping into was the world that was set up by this myth that we had written, that was guided by the four elements and by these guardians that brought us messages through wormholes from the mycelial plane. And I think part of the reason why we have these illustrations in black and white is because there was more collaboration between Zoe and Shaïna, and how to bring the illustrations to life. So I don't know if Shaïna or Zoe, if you want to speak a little bit more to that collaboration process.
Yeah, I can hop in. For folks who missed the intros, I'm Shaïna. My pronouns are they, them. And this was one of the first times that I ever like collaborated with another artist. And I think that it's a very special project near and dear to my heart. And it was really incredible to be able to see the, illustrations that Zoe had put together. And then at the same time, we were also rebranding Spring Up, and I was working on that project. And one of the things that I did in this kind of collaborative process was bring a lot of the colors to these illustrations, in a way that kind of uplifted the color story that we wanted to tell throughout just like the brand presence of Spring Up, but also that showed, all of the different energies, the collective as a whole. And so as we kind of go through and you see a lot more of these like colorized versions, of the illustrations, you'll see that what we're trying to like bring through is to bring that energy that Stas was talking about, through the like visuals. So it was just, as much of the actual like imagery that we also put the colors into it as well. And so, yeah, I think that part of the process of like working with Zoe and kind of talking about, like the color story that we wanted to work on. And there were some kind of preliminary colors that were put into the first set of illustrations, and then kind of, evolved from there to making the final version, which you now can like, access on our online, and also like when you see the actual zine in person. And I feel like it's the type of colors that really, invite you into this fantastical world.
I think we can sorry, so go ahead.
I just wanted to add really quickly that I don't know if I mentioned, these are all pen and ink originally. And I also wanted to say that Shaïna, the color palette is unbelievable, and that Shaïna is the creative genius behind the graphics behind here too.
Absolutely. And I love colors, but I am not a visual artist. And so I think it was really cool to watch the two of them collaborate, where I think if we go on to the next slide, my understanding is that Zoe did the color for the cover. We were not really solid on what the colors for Spring Up would be yet. And so the colors for Spring Up in general were also drawn from the colors that Zoe had put into this original piece. So it really was this back and forth collaboration as to how do we create the images, the color story for what this fantastical mushroom-based world looks like, and how does that also then emanate into everything that we do at Spring Up. As Shaïna mentioned, we're a collective. And so having so many colors felt like it was a good representation of the collective nature of our work. And as a digital collective, it's interesting, everywhere that you go, you're breathing in mushroom spores. And so we like to talk about, outside of being connected through the internet, we're also connected through the mycelial network that connects the entire globe. And so, the wood wide web, rather than just the world wide web, is kind of what we imagine ourselves to be tapping into whenever we collaborate within Spring Up. And so this kind of color and imagery not only was the foundation for the zine, but then was the foundation for all of what we do at Spring Up, our decks, our website, the print materials, our business cards. Everything was this idea of how do we bring the reality that we envisioned within this zine into what we all experience as collective members, and what we invite other people into when we invite them into Spring Up and Blue Light Academy spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in case anyone isn't able to view the slide, I can just describe it really briefly. Just kind of hard because it's really expansive and elaborate. But yeah, just that it's a very detailed pen and ink drawing with pretty saturated, like many colors that are really vibrant. And it's showing Shailai, this character who has a mushroom with like a veil growing out of their head, and some cool, like, you know, facial markings, and the cat that we saw earlier, going through the mycelial network, has kind of found its way to Shailai and is sitting on their shoulder. And yeah, they're just surrounded by like, you know, mountains and nature and roots and mushrooms.
So you can hand it back to Zoe if you want to speak a little bit more to what you were trying to evoke in this imagery, what the different pieces mean to you.
For sure. So yeah, as Lee mentioned, Shailai is pictured with the cat, and they're also kind of existing within this wormhole, the mycelial network. It's kind of an opening to it. And then there are 4 elements represented on the left-hand side of Shailai, and those represent the 4 guardians. And those guardians are the elephant, which we'll talk about a little more, the turtle, the dragon, and the cat. So that's fire, water, earth, and air. And then the landscapes correspond to each guardian and what part of, like which part of the world and the universe that they are associated with.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so should we go to the next?
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why we're going into this so much was we felt that if we had a really clear vision of what we were hoping to create, that it would be easier to magnetize people who had aligned visions that could exist within this expansive world. And so it was really important to us to have clarity on what was kind of the core arc, before we were really recruiting other people to contribute to it, so that it could be a coherent idea. And I think that's one of the challenges that I often have when I'm reading anthologies, is this idea that sometimes the anthologies just feel very disparate from each other, or the pieces that are contributed feel like they're all coming from different perspectives, which can be really cool and wonderful. But we also wanted to capture this idea that without knowing each other, without necessarily planning it with each other, that there's this kind of mycelial connection between so many of the young queer folks in our lives who have this kind of shared sense of what's possible without even necessarily saying it. And so we were trying to say, okay, how do we tap into that ourselves? And then how do we magnetize people who will have their own ideas about what this looks like, that kind of fits into this arc of what is a world that you can just step into and believe exists somewhere, in our imagination, in the multiverse, and in the future. Yeah, so we've been getting at this, and Shaina, if you want to explain what these are and kind of how they came out of our collaborative process.
Yeah, definitely. So what you'll see on the slide here is some of the first images that I had created as a way to invite folks into, kind of sharing their ideas, if they would want to be a part of this zine process before we would go through these applications. So I will kind of read through what they say just to give y'all an idea. And so the first one on the left is a green square and has some really like nice pink pastel bubbles that read, "Have you thought about what a world without policing can look like? How about a world without cash bail or binary gender norms? Or even what our schools would look like if there were social workers to respond to students' needs? Or a spot in your neighborhood with counselors who are easily accessible and are invested in the mental wellness of its community?" The second slide on the right also has 2 kind of abstract bubbles that read, "The state of the nation today is revealing that the system as it stands is not working. We need an alternative." We need your art, writing, and healing remedies to serve as a guide as we navigate the world we live in while working towards building the world we wish to see. What structures do you wish to see in the new world? And so these were really the first kind of like prompts that were, given to folks when trying to create these pieces that they wanted to submit for the zine, whether it be writings or artworks, illustrations, etc. And yeah, before I move to the next slide, which has a few other ones, I didn't know if we want to like jump into the storytelling game that we were talking about.
Yeah, so we were wondering if folks would be open to playing a little game with us about what our vision here in this room may be. And so you can either unmute to participate or you can put things into the chat. But so at Spring Up, we like to play games. We like to play in general. And so one of the games that we often play with each other is this collective storytelling game. And so the 4 pillars of our work at Spring Up, so every season of work, we try to have things that align with our 4 pillars. And our 4 pillars also align with the 4 elements. And those are imagination, creation, building, and supporting. And so we like to imagine things, really embrace speculative fiction and fantasy. We like to create tools. So not just talk about things, but to provide models and things that will last beyond our collective and our relationships with people into things that can kind of sporulate beyond us. And we like to build networks and ecosystems of aligned groups of folks who can work together, because none of this work can happen in isolation. And then finally, we believe in supporting one another, supporting our ecosystem, supporting people in our lives, supporting our ancestors and our descendants. And so one of the things we like to do is use those 4 words as sentence starters to co-create a story. And so the story that we'd like to make with you is an abolitionist vision of the future. So you've seen some of the prompts here of kind of how we invited people to think about the future. And we'd love to hear some ideas of what you think we might imagine, create, build, and support in this abolitionist vision of the future.
And you can either start your sentence with like, we imagine, or you could just use the word imagine in your sentence, whatever feels better to you stylistically.
So again, the words are imagine, create, build, and support.
And so I think, do we want to start people off with one sentence or?
Yeah, and then just organically, you don't have to raise your hand, just like share whenever you feel ready. And it's just about us tapping into this connection with each other. So does anyone feel ready to start us off? Do you have an idea of this?
Does anyone else have a sentence that they'd like to use to get started?
Be in our abolitionist vision, we.
So we'll just unmute. So you opt in when you're ready to share. And I invite, if you feel comfortable sharing, I think that it would be great to get as many voices as possible.
I can go with one. So I thought about, we build the communities and networks that we want to see spread throughout the world, that support us in a way that we can actually find our way to the freedom that we're, trying to get to.
In our abolitionist vision, we imagine new ways to be every day. the way that the way that you identify as a child is not necessarily how you identify when you're older, and everyone is given access to their imagination on a daily basis to shape what they look like, how they show up, what people call them, and what's possible for them in the world.
Hi. Um, Sorry. I was kind of not finding the prompt, but in in my belief in co-creating an abolitionist vision, it's imagine what joy and care and support looks like, creating space to facilitate and allow that joy and space and learning and forgiveness and care to show up, and building and supporting people and all of their experiences and all that they show up in, and building space for people and all that they arrive with to exist, rather than institutions for people to fit themselves inside of.
Thank you. And I'll read this one from the
Yes,
chat
using
too.
all four.
In our abolitionist vision, we support and uplift the messiness of learning within a foundation of community care and loving accountability.
I'll hop in real quick. In our abolitionist future, we imagine a reality where all folks are seen and respected in our full humanity in order to facilitate creativity and build support systems and communities that further our collective reharmonizing.
This is Molly. In our abolitionist vision, we imagine a time of frequency when imprisoned poetry is almost inconceivable. We create cities and open spaces, abundant, accessible to body minds of all sizes, shapes, abilities, backgrounds, and languages, all welcome. We build in supports, an expectation of naps, pleasure, rest, deep sleeps, and fond awakenings.
Would anyone else like to share before we move on? Now's your moment. Sharing from the chat. In our abolitionist vision, we build tools that people can borrow, modify, and recreate. We may not get them back as they were, and that's okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. Anyone else want to add before we move on? Our support cat just showed up. This is our little black cat.
All right. Well, I love these visions so much. This is absolutely on the frequency that we're aiming to get at. And you can absolutely contribute more visions in the chat or unmute and share more as you're thinking. And I just really wanted to appreciate and thank you all so much for sharing your visions with us and co-creating this idea of what we believe not only is possible in the future, but is possible today in our everyday lives, that we can create pockets of this for ourselves and for each other through our relationships, through our networks, and through our own kind of little worlds that we live in ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And this comes from a lot of roots, but I think I wanted to say that someone that we organized with in South Florida, Phil Agnew or Umi Sela would lead this chant that was like, I'm forgetting the exact words, but it was basically like, we need it, we've got to have it, it's already here, right? And I think that just this like idea that we know what we need, we can feel it, we are summoning it, and then we find that it's like already here with us, I think is what we wanted to invoke with this. Because if we know what it feels like, and if it's not a want, but a need, and it's already here, then we just have to water and grow it like a garden, right? We don't need to like tear anything down. We don't need to like control what other people are doing. We just need to build what we already have.
And we can absolutely tear things down along the way, but we can also put our efforts towards having a shared reality that we choose to step into, right?
So let's go to the next slide.
Yeah. So yeah, Shaïna, do you want to share a little bit more about kind of how we called people into that vision?
Yes, definitely. So as we, you saw on the last slide, we were kind of inviting folks in with these prompts. This next slide is really showing who this was for, right? And a lot of the times, like we were talking about before, it can seem like this is not accessible to you, but we really wanted it to be focused around, like young people actually like having these visions and putting these things together. So on the left side, there's a yellow kind of abstract with some bubbles that says, calling all artists, writers, and healers. Spring Up is creating a zine that gives us the opportunity to imagine what freedom and liberation in practice looks like. And on the right, in a bunch of other abstract bubbles, it says, this is for you if you are a young person, millennial or Gen Z, who engages with healing, transformative justice, or care work formally or not. You have been practicing different ways of moving and being in the world. You want to share the ways you know how to survive and thrive. You are a healer, artist, dreamer, or visionary. And so this really was, giving folks some guidelines as to like what we were looking for. And it was really exciting to see all the different people that came out of this call. We had a lot of folks, we shared this on our social media, but we also had within our own community, had them share it through their own personal pods. And we received a lot of submissions that were just so incredible. The process of being able to like read through them, see the visions that these young people had for the future that we're trying to co-create together. So it was really exciting process. And we kind of will take you through what it looked like to actually like go from all of these incredible submissions down to who we chose to actually include in the zine, and then what that looked like. So I'll go on to the next slide.
And one thing I wanted to say was that Sochi, who was and this is Stas again, Sochi, who was the Transformative Justice and Healing Youth Fellow at the time, and Alexis, who was one of the editors, they pulled together a long list of ideas of what, the This Is For You If might look like, or what the different visions might be. And then they tried it out with people in their lives of just saying like, does this feel real to you? Does this feel like something you would say yes to? Does this feel more too abstract and you don't know what it would mean for you to claim that for yourself? Or does this use too much jargon? And so when we settled on these were the ones that folks, in our lives felt the most called to and felt the least like they needed to have some type of expertise or have some sense of already claiming that they do TJ or abolitionist work, that they felt that was still something that could work for them. And so I really encourage that kind of participatory process of identifying what's the right wording to use for things before you put it out into the community, because we were able to kind of zero in on the main things that felt more like they would work for the young people in our lives. So yeah, let's go on to the next slide.
So this slide is really showing like a couple of the questions that was in our application process or submission process. And so just to give you an idea of what is on this slide, we have one question that says, what kind of piece will you be pitching? And so you could choose as many of these options as you liked. So there was artwork, all mediums, poetry, storytelling, creative writing, healing tools, recipe, and other. And then to the side of this question, there's also another one that says, please provide a detailed description of your pitch. A strong pitch will name why this fits into resilience and revitalization and how you hope people will be impacted by your submission. If you are unsure how to frame your pitch or how your pitch fits into this question, please reach out to our team member, Alexis, via email or Instagram. And we also gave an option that if you prefer to do a video explanation or provide us with a mock-up, please indicate that below and use the next question to upload your file. So this, I could pass it also back to Stas and Lee to talk a little bit about also like the coaching that was involved, which allowed for if folks wanted to be a part of this, but didn't really like know how to, go about this application process, really making it feel like a place where, hey, you have an idea, like we have somebody that's part of this team that's putting this together that can actually like help coach you through your idea so that you can put a submission in.
And part of this was that I don't know if anyone has ever applied to a like anthology or journal or something, but it is extremely intimidating. And those can be very, very inaccessible processes. They can really focus on like, oh, have you been published before? By whom? And we really wanted to have people who had not been published before.
Yeah,
right?
The vast majority of people said that this was the first time that their work was published in a formal publication, which was really exciting for us and for them, I think. And I also wanted to name that it's not listed here because it's at the beginning of the form, but people also have the option to request an interview instead of needing to put their information in through either pre-recorded video or text. And then also that what we found was that we did have a few people schedule interviews. We did have a few people submit videos when they were given that option. And then also that although we shared Alexis's email address and Instagram, it was particularly the Instagram DMs that Alexis got, particularly from young people who were like 18 and under, were primarily DMing Alexis, asking like, can I meet with you? Can we talk about these ideas? And so if you're thinking about making something like this, I think having multiple options for how people can share their ideas, and not just an email address, which can feel more formal, but an Instagram that someone can DM, or maybe a TikTok or a Twitter account or some sort of social media that people can directly message and ask questions that way, felt a lot more approachable for a lot of the young people. And that's who ended up going through more of the coaching to prepare what they wanted to pitch. And I think what was cool about it was Alexis shared with us that while she did coaching for a larger number of young people that ended up applying, that even the people who said like, I don't feel ready to apply for this right now, felt that the opportunity to just talk with Alexis about their visions, about their artwork, about, a lot of them were young poets or graphic designers who were just thinking about what it would mean for them to embrace their creativity in the world, that even if they didn't feel ready to really participate in this project right now, that it felt like a really supportive space to be able to just talk to someone about their vision, and that wasn't something that you only got access to after you applied, but that it was something that you got access to before the application process. I think made it something that more people were able to get access to and participate in.
And with the goal of this like resourcing this broad digital community, we wanted like, even if people just saw the like social media post, or even if they just were talked to about this by someone in their life, or if they considered applying, that also had the outcome of making them feel like they were part of this like abolitionist co-creation of the world we want. and that, that they were part of that they belonged in that, and that whatever they were creating or doing could be seen as part of that.
And I think a lot of that was, it wasn't just about the outcome of what we ended up making. It was that we felt that the entire process needed to be aligned with that vision of people feeling that this was for them and something that they could imagine in their lives.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so the people in that original photo, so it was Stas, myself, Lee, Shaïna, and Sochi and Alexis. We all scored every application, and this wasn't like a really strict rubric of like, oh, a 4 means this super explicitly. It was more like 5 means like, I will be upset if this is not included, like I will advocate for this piece, and a 3 was like,
I like it. I don't think it's not aligned, but right. I'm not like that excited about it.
Right. And then there really weren't very many 1s, but I think lower than a 3 just meant like, I don't know if this feels aligned with what we're trying to do, or I'm not sure how we would include this, or just this is on a different topic.
And so we had been part of a few different application review processes for different fellowships, and a lot of the rubrics felt very like they were trying to get rid of bias by having some objective idea of, was this well written, or did this have a clear vision? And it felt like many of those things would actually cause us to be reinforcing a lot of white supremacy thinking around the way that people put their ideas together, fitting into a specific grammatical framework, or and so instead we spent our time really figuring out what our goals as a group were, what we wanted to be true about the outcome, which was, we knew we wanted to center youth voices. We knew that we wanted the majority of contributors to be queer and trans. We knew that we wanted the majority of contributors to be people of color. We had a really fruitful, interesting conversation around disability justice and what it meant to us, particularly because Sochi is a part of Project Let's, which is a program around disability justice and peer mental health support. And so we had a lot of conversations around what that meant for us without necessarily settling on a specific goal outcome, but that felt important for us to be thinking about as we imagined what this looked like. And then Sochi ended up writing a piece imagining what disability justice would look like in their life, that I think is one of the most moving pieces in general for us. We didn't include it in this because it's quite long, but it's one of the ones that's just a standout that people often are saying that just really shifted their understanding of like what it would mean to be in relationship with people that decentered like kind of institutions of mental health and physical health. And then we knew that we wanted it to have a future orientation. And that was what we ended up kind of coaching people through the most. There were people who had contributions that seemed really cool, but didn't have quite a very clear image of what this looks like in the future. And so we didn't want to be editing, like the role of an editor wasn't necessarily to make the content more grammatically correct or more concise, but it was how do we make it as tangible as possible around what this actually looks and feels like in the future. And that's what most of the coaching ended up being. We knew we wanted it to be multimedia, and we wanted to have a good balance between the different types of pieces that were contributed. And then we knew that we wanted it to be aligned with our transformative justice values. And we already had kind of a list of about 10 to 15 core values that guide our transformative justice work. So we knew that if we had a lot of discussion about what that meant to us, we could almost like embrace our biases, as long as we labeled them to say like, yeah, we're gonna have a bias for people who we identify with, people who feel aligned with this vision. And that's not something to like sort out through some sort of objective rubric or metric. And so everyone had a column in the spreadsheet to put 1 through 5 with some rationale of why they put that number. And it was really interesting because we all did it independently, but when we came back together, we found there was a lot of commonality between how we all rated the people. So that was also kind of a cool way for us to feel that we had created a sense of cohesion amongst our team.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that was both difficult for people in wanting to like be inclusive and like, like we got all these pitches, like what would that look like to, not turn people away? But then pieces that really, really were extremely aligned might have gotten lost in the kind of stack because it was hard to read like 45 pitches. And so we didn't want our anthology to feel like that, like just like, oh my God, I can barely make it through this. And so at the end of the day, we were like, someone on the team has to feel like enthusiastic. And ideally, most of us will feel really enthusiastic about a piece. And like, we just couldn't imagine it being cut, which is a high bar. And I think when you're evaluating people's art, that can feel really tricky just to be like, oh, because I think people can hear it as like, this art isn't, good enough, or this art isn't at like a professional quality. But instead it really was like, we feel enthusiastic about how this represents the vision that we're going for. And I think we tried to communicate that in turning people away, and to thank them for their application by responding to it, giving them some like tangible feedback, and then also like having them tell us, would they like a cash gift card, because it takes labor to apply for something. Would they like a gift card to a Black owned creative business? Or not everyone said that they wanted a gift card, but we gave that opportunity to everyone who applied.
And we did 3 rounds of cuts. So the first round was looking at everyone and just cutting any that were under a 3-point average. And then the second round was sorting all the applications by medium. So visual art, poetry, prose, healing tools, and then trying to find more of a sense of like parity or balance between the different ones. And then once we had a sense of balance, we sorted them into the different sections of the zine so that there would be balance between the different sections of content. And then we said the kind of thank you for applying and tangible feedback to everyone who wasn't selected, and the people who were selected, we paired with a coach and asked them to schedule a time on our calendar to talk about their vision, to talk about how it would fit into the graphics. And most of the people who had more visual art to contribute were coached by Shaïna. And then folks who were doing poetry were coached more by Sochi and Alexis. And then contributions that were healing tools and prose were more coached by the 2 of us. So we each kind of had our own focus that we were editing, so we could find some sense of cohesion between the different groups. And yeah.
I wanted to pause here and just say, I know that like applications can be really complicated, in terms of trying to make like a values-based application process. Does anyone have any questions about this kind of selection process, or anything that you'd like to share about other projects that you've been part of?
I will say the other thing was that the gift cards were, I think, $20 to $50, depending on kind of the length of the application. Particularly, we had people name if they were submitting something that had been pre-made or they were pitching a new idea. And so that kind of shifted how much pay came. And then we did the same thing with selections, was that people who were selected with something that they had pre-written was I think $150, and people who had created a new piece for this got $250 for their contribution. And we wanted to make sure that it was clear on paper that the content was co-owned. And so that meant that they still retained ownership rights to distribute that piece in other places or to publish it in their own publications, but that we also had the right to print and distribute it. And that was really, really important to us to have in writing, that we weren't purchasing the rights to what they had created in a way that they didn't have access to anymore, but that it was something that we had the ability to use in this resource and that they retained ownership of.
All right, I'll just leave a few more seconds in case anyone wants to ask a question or share a comment here, and then we'll watch this video.
I'm wondering if you might want to talk about how the gift cards work, and like how you were able to connect with these businesses. And I don't know how that like fit into your budget. I don't know if people would be curious about that.
Absolutely. Shaina, I know you were in charge of the gift cards. Do you want to share a little bit more about that process?
Yeah, definitely. So, in terms of like cash gift cards, well, all of the gift cards that we were sending were digital. As you know, the first kind of thing is that it had to be something that we could send to folks digitally. Just in, you know, it was a lot easier than trying to mail someone a gift card. But in terms of like the gift cards that we had decided, you know, like if folks wanted to choose instead of a cash gift card, it would be a gift card to like a Black owned creative business. I actually was the one to like do the research in compiling a list of different creative businesses that were Black owned to kind of decide like, okay, well, we'll have this list. Included in that list was my own vintage boutique that I was running at the time, as well as some others that they based my research was like I had to find if they had the option to have a gift card, and also that it was a like within the scale that we were saying between the 25 to 50, right? So it really was just kind of like going through and researching different businesses that we were excited about, but also just like in general that we would love like other folks to, you know, have access to and get excited about. And that was really the process of how we decided to choose those. So it really was based on like, do these businesses fit into that like criteria of having the digital gift cards? And then we provided that list for folks who wanted to choose one of those options. Okay, and then so now I will play this video for y'all. It's about 5 minutes, and this really just kind of takes you through a little bit through the process of the making of this project. So you'll see from the beginning stage of some of these kind of like interviews that we did with the contributors and their inspiration behind their pieces, as well as we did a live reading where some of the contributors actually like read some of their pieces after it was published. And then you'll see how we kind of created an entire merch collection around this, this project, and how that was kind of like spread throughout the world. Really, we've got folks from all over in many different countries that now have our zine. We have so far pretty much distributed almost 1,000 of our zines, which is really exciting to say a year later. So yep, to the video we go.
Shaina, I think you have to unmute because we are not hearing the audio of the video.
Oh yes, sorry about that, y'all. Let me start it.
When I was thinking about this zine, I thought a lot about how healing and revitalization, and also just the magic of just all of the pieces that make healing and community happen. For communities of color, I thought about how like that just feels like such a foundational piece for.
I hope that people will feel a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable, with being in the middle of a process, you know, because a lot of the times I feel like you really just want the end goal, you know, it's the work that is the hardest part of the journey. And I guess for me specifically, when I'm going through all of these things, I feel silly sometimes, you know, like I feel a little like, how is this going to help me? But I think it's making the active choice to continue.
Sexual assault on college campuses is so prevalent. It's also the reason why I feel like TJ can work so well, because these communities are already in place, and because they have the flexibility of being able to dictate their own policies and how they respond to harm. And because programs like TJPP are being able to be implemented on some college campuses, like we really do have more autonomy in handling harm and how we facilitate that process.
Justice as a form of healing, and as like a vehicle for healing, as a container for healing, and like honestly, like at the base of it, like the primary thing is about healing. And one thing, as like I've thought through my own work cycles, my own like definition and interaction with labor, is that cycles of work and rest, and the ways that rest interacts with work, and how you can work restfully, or creating like an environment that wherever you like create or like labor under is as comfortable and healing as possible for you. That's been the biggest part of not only like my other like non-creative work, but just like any type of like work or project I'm doing.
Things I like to have clearly defined. Sit down with someone and talk about how you relate to some of these notions. How does it change relating to have co-created definitions for these things? Safety versus comfort, virtues versus values, boundaries versus rules, feelings versus the story of feels, loyalty versus autonomy, humanity versus intellect.
Notice the chatter that prevents your focus on the matter in front of you. In the present, take in all that is in view. Let go of what your thoughts think you should do. Listen to your heart. To safety, your intuition will always guide you. Light uncovers the dark. Light uncovers the dark. Light uncovers the dark. Light uncovers the dark. Peace and prosperity. Peace and prosper with me.
How might we equip ourselves for this constant gut-wrenching and nourishing work? By creating our own ecosystem of healing. Abiotic components of an ecosystem are non-living elements that create an environment in which organisms can survive and thrive. You might think of sunlight, rain, and temperature. What are non-living modalities that support your healing? It could include taking a bath, tarot, an altar, tattoos, essential oils, adorning your body in clothes you love.
Text deja vu on my phone. The known dances behind closed lips, burning me, feeling fate. I choke as I rush to soothe, to numb, to be ice on the sears of your touch. I drift, turn soft ash, smother white fires with unsettled flesh, fires by your hand, which will sharpen too.
Yeah, and so this is Stas again. That last bit that you saw there is all on our Instagram highlights. So if you want to slow down and kind of zoom in and look at them a little bit more closely, you can follow us at Time to Spring Up on Instagram, and you can see all the different ways that people have, made the recipes or practice the time traveling conversation guide that Corey made, or find some of the linked accounts for the different creators that were featured here.
Yeah, so with the rest of our time, we're just going to get into featuring a little bit more of the content, and then we'll close by sharing ways that you can access more of this, and answering any questions you have about how you want to, use this resource.
So
So
here you can see the colorized versions of the black and white illustration that Zoe made earlier. So you can see kind of what it looked like for Shaïna to add all the color to that black and white pen on ink illustration.
So let's go to the next one. And so this isn't super detailed, but I tried to make a little map of, this is kind of showing that the contributors and people who worked on this really were all over the US. I think not all areas are represented, but we wanted to get outside of like just having the coasts represented. And including folks from the Midwest, from the South, was really important to us.
So the zine is separated into 3 sections, and the first section is guided by the elephant, and is all about self-knowledge and connection. And so you can see on the right-hand side the name, age, and pronouns of the contributors to that section of content. And then we wanted to zoom in on one comic, which is on the next one. And this is a comic made by Garner. And at the top, they write by hand, a collection of small moments reshaping my mindset around a shame and guilt has been an ongoing and often uncomfortable or unnatural process. It means being more honest, vulnerable, open to change than I have ever been. And then on the left, it says, I told myself, you look pretty today. It felt silly and almost embarrassing, but also not bad, question mark. There's a little line drawing of them looking at themselves in the mirror. And then on the right-hand side, you can see them maybe lifting some weights, sleeping. They have dirty dishes in the sink and at their computer that says, today I did all the things I hate, but I did them for myself. Yes.
Anyone feel that way?
And I think there's a little bit more of this on the next one. On the left, it has a line drawing of them maybe in bed, and it says, today I said no to everything. And then the next one shows sitting at a bench, and it says, today I made some hard decisions. It did not feel good. What I want isn't always what I need. I am hurting, but I am proud. And then on the bottom left, it has them sitting down, maybe on a mat of some sort. I will sit and eat and breathe and not feel guilty. And then it shows them maybe in the bathroom with a shower curtain behind, looking in the mirror, and it says, love you. So there's also a feature of Alexis interviewing them, talking about kind of how they felt not spoken to by this idea of self-care, and what are maybe ways that we can embrace this idea of self-care without giving into this kind of capitalist notion of, purchasing things or kind of things that feel inaccessible to some of us in our lives.
Let's go to the next one. And so this is a colorful image of the second section, which is about conflict and transformative justice. And it shows a turtle with a whole botanical world kind of exploding from its back. And the contributors to this were particularly young and particularly focusing on, conflict and transformative justice. And so everyone that contributed to this section was 19 to 22, including a couple of our team members, Sochi and Karina. And then we were really excited to be able to include a poetry collective of incarcerated women at the Dayton Correctional Institution. And I think that was a group of, about 15 people convened by folks at Antioch College. And the ability to coordinate communication with them and then also get them kind of thank you gifts to their commissary funds was one of the biggest logistical hassles actually that we dealt with. And that was one of the reasons why we really had to slow down, I think, the publication process, is just that it took a long time to be able to get this work from them, because the people coordinating with them were only able to visit them like every month or two. And then we, had kind of a round of editing, but it was really, really important to us to be able to include some incarcerated voices and what their visions are within this zine. So I'm just really grateful that that actually like worked out. We didn't think it was going to for quite a while.
And we were able to send them copies of the zines as well as posters that they could put up of the artwork. And we were able to send them their stipends through contributing it to their commissary, which was something that we were really, really happy to be able to figure out how to do. And so we wanted to read their piece specifically because it's one that feels really, really near and dear to our hearts. But although all the pieces in this section are really, really powerful, including the one that I mentioned earlier from Sochi. So this piece says, come in, a tool belt of lessons and knowledge acquired during my incarceration years. And each of them contributed one of these lines. So showing what I've conquered and endured, only making me stronger.
Movement is the essence of song.
How would I be welcomed? Life would have to start completely over, and that is really scary to me.
I am bathed in curiosity and distrust.
I choke on the uncertainties that being alone brings.
Will I be welcomed? They may ask me, are you a colonizer? Are you planning a theft? I will say, I hope we can dance. Can we exchange gifts?
Hugs, laughter, and champagne.
I am welcomed back into the community with the gift of a second chance.
I'm welcome to a world of non-judgmental words spoken against others.
I'm welcomed, I'm loved, I'm wanted and accepted just for who I am.
Overcoming gravity, greeted by real heart and soul of the cosmic journey to liquid outer space.
As I enter perfect dice, I'm adorned with a crown endowed in red rubies and pearls.
When I first walk into this new world that's evolving every day, I steady my pace and just look at all the wonderful things.
I breathe deep, evergreens, rain, chickadees, and creek as the dogs run past my legs.
Laying in wait, a part of me still feels I haven't arrived just yet.
It doesn't seem to ever be called good luck and make your art, follow your dreams, heal your heart. Regardless, welcome home.
A new world and a new people stop, share, love, and greet.
We build structures of care like skylines, hold tall like aspen pines, but their beauty is rooted.
Come in. Wise hands share food under glowing canopies, murmurations of joyous creatures. In my welcoming, I learn how to welcome.
Bright blue skies, warm sunshine, and a gentle breeze caress my face as I step out the front door into the free world.
In fact, more loved than I ever have felt before, warm and soft and squishy inside like a bowl full of my favorite oatmeal.
I am received with grace, equipped with the words of life, clothed in strength and dignity, commissioned here and now, gifted by the Spirit, forgiven and unbound, damaged but delivered.
I am once more blessed with life, and the future is before me.
And I think that just including this, I don't know, I literally start tearing up like every time I read this. And I think that this just makes me feel like the people who are, you know, incarcerated and imprisoned in this current system just have such a deep knowledge of what is not working and what we need. And just that we need to like include them and welcome them and help them get out and follow their lead.
Let's go on to the next slide. So the third and final section of the zine is called Magic and the Earth, and you can see a dragon in the mountains with a giant sun. And this section had 5 different contributions. And part of the reason why we wanted to include the pronouns as well was it was just incredible how many people were going by they, them, and what it means to embrace kind of this queering of the future, this ability to shape your reality by going by different pronouns. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. And so this is a piece by Asha, which you can see on the previous slide as a 19-year-old organizer who was envisioning what the future can look like very tangibly. So you can see it says, we keep us safe. There's a communal labor network with renewable materials where people choose shifts. There's a school that says we learn about the basics of each subject, specific interests, and what role you want in sustaining your community. And there's a learning center with a playground on the top, and there's solar panels that charge the school. There's community work training college, and there's no dumping. You have to dump your biodegradable waste in a different area. There's a free healthcare section, and there's a mental health assistance kind of orb that has general help as well as a crisis area and people who are walking and biking. And if you go on to the next one.
I love that. Yeah, it's a no car environment. There's a stand that has herbal medicines. It says harm reduction on the side of the building. A group of people of different races are doing yoga. There's this kind of shop area that says hemp fashion, but that says take what you need. There's people talking to each other saying, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? What do you need to make things right? Let's process. There's an orb that says housing for all. There's people sitting in the park, including some people being affectionate, sitting on a bench, a circle of people in a transformative justice process. And then there's a shed that says garden for community. Don't live in excess, take what you need.
And then there are two people in wheelchairs, maybe celebrating in the middle, and someone with a dress that has the trans flag on it. So let's go on to the next piece. And so, yeah, we just wanted to share some of the takeaways of our collaboration. We focused the coaching not on kind of traditional editing, but on kind of our future orientation and collective visioning. We really learned to slow down. We originally thought it was going to take about 6 months, maybe 3 months, and it ended up taking 18 months. And that was actually something that was really supportive for all of us. And in reflection, we wish we had had more balance between planning, creating, and then sharing. We put a lot of time and effort into the design of the process, the recruitment, but didn't put as much time and effort into how we were going to distribute it afterwards and kind of how we would market it to people, which felt kind of icky, but also really necessary to get the word out. We wish we had had clear distribution of responsibilities from the beginning.
Particularly, we kept kind of just being like, what is an editor? I feel like that's like very like ambiguous.
And if we had planned for the project to take 3 to 6 months and it ended up taking 18 months, it was kind of hard for us to negotiate how that timeline extension would impact each of us differently, having different responsibilities.
Yeah, and in terms of relationship building, there was a lot of like one-on-one good relationship building, but with how long it took, we think we could have done more like cohort and community-wide relationship building. And then just that it was really, really important to have a youth fellow on the team. And I think that really helped us connect with teenagers specifically.
So we're almost done, folks. Sorry to keep you later. So it's been 1 year since we published. We really valued making something lasting by creating a free online platform that people could get access to. We also felt that it was important to have something physical. And I think in the desire to have something free online, sometimes there's a bit of a loss of the physical artifact that feels really, really powerful. And so we wanted to make sure that we had something, and I think especially being able to share that with people now, the art just calls to people in a way that's different from what's online. And then, yeah, as Shaïna mentioned earlier, we have distributed 920 print copies of the zine. We've had 536 people register for the free online course. And our goal was to make abolition feel colorful, desirable, accessible, and tangible. And on the bottom, you can see what the print of the zine looks like. You can see kind of our cat, Lord Audrey, with some of the printouts and zines in the middle. And then you can see the postcards, art prints, stickers, and tote bags on the right side.
And Shaïna, are you grabbing those links for folks to access the free online class?
I am trying to, but I think that because my browser has this open, yeah, so if y'all would be able to.
Yes, we will grab that.
Cool, thank you.
If you can go on to the next slide so we can keep explaining this while we find that.
Yeah, and so we have used the postcards to do letter writing projects to institutionalized incarcerated people, and that's something that we hope people will continue doing. We know it can't get into all institutions and prisons, but if you can, it's something that isn't that provocative, and so it can get past some like censorship, and also can give people some imaginative and whimsical art to have in there with them. And then also there's a link to this free online class. So if people have access to the internet, this is something that they can access. And yeah, this online course is free. And so just that we encourage you to really share that. We want to keep getting the word out, and for this to continue, spreading. And then on this last image slide, we have, now that we've started to do some limited in-person things, we have this vibrant art that we can do tabling with. And
it always brings the kids to our table, which is so great. We were at a conference last weekend, and every single child who was at that conference came to the table to be grabbing the colorful stickers and stuff. And that just made us so happy to feel like that was something that could call in even really young children to feel like this was something that they could get access to, even if they can't read, just to be able to see the images and feel like it could be a part of their lives.
Yeah, and there's an image at the top of this slide that has a person who's maybe like 3 years old,
who's literally being lifted up to be able to see the table, and they're just grabbing at the things on the table.
Yeah, and so I feel like that's really just our like, okay, this is like successful because it like is something that like not even teens but like children just want to like get their hands on, and so yeah, just that we're continuing to try to get it in in-person bookstores and stuff. So if you have any leads there, you can follow up with us, because yeah, we just want to continue to spread this.
Let's go on to the next slide. So we're just going to close out with reading the final message from Shaïna. So at the end of the zine, we have this kind of goodbye message from Shaïna, who's been channeled throughout the whole thing. So it says,
"Hurry, hurry, it's almost too late. Slow down, you'll rush past the gate. The portal is open, the time is at hand. The choice remains yours, I just hold out my hand. Follow me. To get out of here, you'll have to face several tendencies in yourself. The first is the tendency to divide, binaries. The second is the tendency to conquer, hierarchy. Good, bad,
self, other,
wise, fool,
past, future,
human, nature. The aquifer is unleashed. A spring emerges and life comes from it. An iris blooms in the midst of a desert."
And you can see these are kind of going in and out. We wanted it to feel like you have to really grasp to keep getting the message from Shaïna, and to look for their messages within your own life. So that's been the Resilience and Revitalization zine. We're so happy to have been able to share this with you. And we'd love to stay in community if you have any ideas for how to get the word out, or if you embark on projects that are similar to this, we'd love to hear about it and see if there are any ways that we can support you in that work.
Yeah, so thanks so much for joining us, and thanks Shaïna and Zoe for supporting on this whole project and on this presentation.
We'll stick around for a couple minutes in case there are any last questions or reflections that folks want to share with us, but we know we've kept you a little bit after time, so if you have to leave, we totally understand.
Yeah, and let's stop the recording now just in case folks want to say anything not on there.